April 29th, 2001 is when 6-year-old Haley Zega went missing while out on a hike with her grandparents in the Arkansas wilderness, launching one of the largest search efforts in Arkansas history. Anytime a child goes missing, it's one of the most unimaginable, unbearable thing any parent could ever go through, knowing time is of the essence. Now, the reason I chose to cover this story is because throughout the timeline here, there is two key things that really stood out to me and made me ask myself these two questions. One, was there a supernatural presence at work here? And two, what are the odds of this happening? And when I say what are the odds, I don't mean what are the odds of her going missing. I simply mean what are the odds of a certain chain of events happening during the search? I know that's pretty vague, but trust me when I say it will all make sense as we get into the story. So make sure you watch till the very end because you're going to want to hear every detail of the search for Haley Zega. Haley and her grandparents decided to go on a hike one day in the Ozark National Forest, a remarkable area in the outdoors filled with bluffs, rivers, waterfalls, you name it. A very dense forest which would be a dream for any outdoor enthusiast. But Haley wasn't so fond of the outdoors and had no experience when it came to survival scenarios or navigating. The original plan was to hike to a waterfall in the forest that required a little bit of technical skill to climb down to. She and her grandparents had already hiked quite a bit and she was becoming exhausted, impatient, and quite cranky, which is quite normal for a child when they're put in a situation to do something they don't really want to do. Despite being grumpy and exhausted, she still wanted to see this waterfall, but her grandparents finally decided that they would not be going down to the waterfall and decided to head back. As disgruntled as she was at the time, she decided to plant herself down on a rock and decided she wasn't going anywhere and that her grandparents would have to carry her. Her grandparents then played the classic card that my parents played when I was younger, and that was telling her, "If you are not going to come with us, we will leave you here." Now this prompted her to start walking and following behind her grandparents, and there was multiple times when she would stop, start walking again, only to stop yet again. This continued to go on all while her grandparents kept a close eye on her from a distance. Her grandparents then decided to walk ahead a little further to then double back and meet up with her, but when they did, there was no sign of her. At that same time, Haley continued to move forward and recollected seeing nothing but dense foliage and could no longer see or hear her grandparents. She continued forward until there was a split in the trail and then decided to trek down one path in hopes of it reuniting back with her grandparents, but this hope soon faded. This trail that young Haley decided to venture down only brought her deeper into the wilderness and further away from her grandparents. She then realized she was lost. Later on during that first day, she continued to move along and eventually discovered the Buffalo River, which is also at the same time she hatched a plan to follow the river with the belief that it would eventually lead her to a bridge with a road that would end up taking her to a gas station. This was very wise of her and quite impressive at such a young age, and I say that because she wasn't wrong. There's that old saying that goes, if you're lost and in doubt, follow the river because it always leads to civilization. If you're ever in that situation, you always want to follow the water downhill. And when I looked up the Buffalo River on Google Maps, either way she would have went, it would have eventually led her to multiple road crossings, campgrounds, a major highway, and multiple farms located along the river as well. But unfortunately, she was still miles away from the nearest point of human contact. Once she made it to the Buffalo River, she made her way through the water and propped herself up onto a rock, thinking this would make her as visible as possible with the hopes of one of the many helicopters flying around being able to spot her, but they never did. The second day came along and she continued along with her journey, trekking along the river and occasionally coming back into the woods to escape the piercing heat of the sunlight, all while still being able to keep an eye on the river. The third day came along, and at this point she hadn't had any food or water in just over 48 hours. She was becoming desperate and was trying anything she could do to make her presence known in the wilderness. She repeatedly shouted her name, her parents' names, and their phone numbers, any little thing she could that might catch someone's ear and let them know she's there. She even threw sand in the air at one point, hoping it would catch the attention of the helicopters circling the area, but was again left with disappointment. After being out in the woods for just over 2 days, hungry, tired, thirsty, and alone, all hope seemed lost. Haley decided to take a break and have a seat on a rock, and just as she did that, the most amazing thing happened. 2 men who had been searching for her on mules finally found her. William Jeff Villainous and Lytle James approached her, confirmed her name, and then gave her a Diet Coke and chocolate pudding, which I'm sure after being in the woods for just over 2 days, it was probably the best tasting Diet Coke and chocolate pudding in the world. Now, this is where things get interesting, because it comes back to the 2 questions that I asked in the beginning. What are the odds of this happening? So the two men that found her actually were not even a part of the official search party. They, however, did grow up there, were very familiar with the area and the outdoors, and when they approached the official search party and said, "We have a pretty good idea of where she could be, and we think you guys should check out this area," believe it or not, their request was actually denied. Hard to believe, right? The reason they were dismissed is because the search party didn't believe she could have gone that far. Based off of other missing kids cases, Haley's age, and other information they had about her, the model the search team put together outlining where she could realistically be compared to where these two men thought she would be just didn't fit that model. And the search team didn't want to waste time, efforts, and resources searching an area where she might not be. And that's essentially why the search party dismissed the two men's request. Now, this has baffled me from the very first time I heard this story because, in the case of a missing child, if locals that were extremely familiar with the land came up to you and pitched their reasoning as to where they think she could be, wouldn't you at least want to take that into consideration and maybe deploy a smaller search party to that area? That part has never made sense to me. Now, this is where things get even more interesting, and it goes back to what I said in the beginning about a supernatural presence at work here. So after Haley was found and brought back to her parents and treated, she was questioned by authorities and family about what happened in the woods and about her time out there. And she said that she was fine because her imaginary friend Alicia was with her the entire time and helped her get through it. This struck authorities and her family as a little odd because they thought that she might have made up this imaginary friend as a way to kind of help her get through this tough time. But the more questions they asked about her, it seemed like the more real she became. Haley said that her imaginary friend made sure she was safe and sang songs with her, played games with her, kept her company, and even helped her navigate her way down the 200-foot bluffs so that way she could make it down to the river. And from what I researched, there weren't too many ways to make it down those bluffs, and the ways that there were, they could still be pretty treacherous even for an adult to trek down. Haley had definitely defied all the odds of making it down the bluffs. Now, the idea of looking further into this imaginary friend and trying to learn a little bit more about her eventually faded. The more important thing was that she was found and she was safe. Now, this is where things get yet again even more interesting. So because this was one of the largest search efforts in Arkansas history, after Haley was found, her story became pretty big news across the U.S., and once it made the papers, details about her imaginary friend were told. Haley talked about how her imaginary friend Alicia, who was 4 years old, and how she had black hair and brown eyes, and how she kept her company and kept her safe until she was found. People eventually came across the story in the paper and noticed the details about Haley's imaginary friend and how similar they were to another little girl that went missing in the same area Haley went missing. It happened 23 years prior, and that little girl also had black hair, brown eyes, was 4 years old, and her name was Alana. But unfortunately, Alana was later found dead. Now ask yourself this question. What are the odds of another little girl going missing in that area and then develops an imaginary friend fitting the description of another little girl that went missing there 23 years earlier? Kinda crazy, right? Now, over the years, news outlets and people who heard of the story have said that this imaginary friend could have been a psychological phenomenon, spirit guide, or even a guardian angel that was looking out for her. Haley later on went on to say that her imaginary friend was with her from the moment she was lost and was with her until she was found. She also stated that she never had an imaginary friend before or after that. Now, out of all the missing 411 cases that are out there, I would say the majority of them don't have a happy ending like this one. Most of the people that go missing are either never found or there is very little of them found, such as only a hat, shoe, coat, or even partial remains. So that begs the question, was there a higher power out there keeping an eye on her? Was this her guardian angel? Or could it have been the spirit from the other little girl that had gone missing out there many years ago, keeping a close eye on Haley to make sure she did not suffer the same fate as she did? You guys let me know what you think in the comments section down below. I would love to hear about it, and be sure to check out Haley's channel where she tells the story herself. Link for her channel will be in the description below.